Go ahead.
Growing luminous. On the mystic path, we create our own light, and at first we struggle blind and baffled, seeing nothing, hearing nothing, unable to think, unable to imagine. We seem deserted by a dream, vision, or inspiration, and our meditation barren altogether. But let us persist through weeks or months, and sooner or later that stupor disappears. Our faculties readjust themselves and do the work we will them to do. Never did they do their work so well. The dark caverns of the brain begin to grow luminous. We are creating our own light. George William Russell.
Thank you so much. That is really a very wonderful quote for this week's topic. He's talking about the mystic path, and that's George William Russell, who's an Irish mystic who has a theosophical background. And we are going to be hearing today on the topic of Noetic devotion about a German Christian mystic named Meister Eckhart. And we're fortunate to have with us today Ram Dass Lam, who is a religious studies professor at Manoa. We usually hear from Ram Dass, who has his Hindu name, on different Hindu topics, but this is a man of breadth. He doesn't have to stay in that box. In fact, I understand that Meister Eckhart is one of his favorites, probably from the standpoint of this kind of direct knowing that as we've been taking up all these noetic topics this year, we're, I think, on our last one, perhaps, which is noetic devotion. So it's something very different from blind devotion, because noesis has to do with this power of seeing and direct knowing. I get it. So Ram Dass, without further ado.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Renee, and those of you who are here. So I want to start out by what I've done is I spent a little bit of time ago and I took some of my favorite quotes of Eckhart and I kind of put them in a bit of an order to use them as a way of kind of thinking about Meister Eckhart and Noetic devotion. So the very first one, I think, is be willing to be a beginner every single morning. We need to start all over every day, right? It's a new moment, it's a new day, it's a new reality. And whatever happened in the past is in the past, and this moment is important. And then we look, and then the next one that I wanted to quote was truly in the darkness, it is in the darkness that one finds light. So when we are in sorrow, then this light is nearest to all of us. And it's because when we are in sorrow, our ego is gone. And it's like we are now suffering. We realize it's not all about me. There's other things that are going on in the world that I don't know how to deal with. And so I know that I don't know. And it's at that point where we can really learn. So is another thing that he said, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. And it immediately took me to Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu says, on the road to wisdom, on the road to knowledge, every day something is gained, but on the road to wisdom, every day something is lost. And so we have to let go. And so Meister Eckhart tells us to be full of things is to be empty of God. To be empty of things is to be full of God. And so this whole thing about letting go, and it took me to so I was raised as a Catholic. I wanted to be a Catholic priest. Devotion was Italian devotion. My mother, very strong Southern Italian Catholic. And so that was the form of devotion that I was raised with. And once I went to India and I met my teacher, and he's coming from a very Vedantic perspective. And it was hard for me to understand because I understood devotion to God, but to understand the kind of inner vision of God and inner experience, that wasn't something that I had ever learned in the time that I was a Catholic, but I kind of left the church when I was about 16. Um, and so I'm sitting on a train and I'm going to see my teacher, and there's a man sitting next to me. And when you ride, and this is the third class train days, and if there's 50 seats, there was 150 people, and so you got to know people really well because you're all squeezed up together. And there's this guy sitting next to me, and he looks at me and he says, "What's your name?" And I told him Ramdas, and he pulls out a little card and he gives it to me. And my teacher had given me a mantra, Soham, which means I am he. And it can be noetic, but it's not devotional, right? And I was having a hard time connecting that. And so he gave me this card, and I looked at the card, and the card, it was a poem. And the name of the poem was I Am He. And I thought, this is amazing. Um, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. Um, and it was by Swami Ramdas in South India. And it says, "In my heart dwelleth God, and I love him in all beings. In my eyes dwelleth God, and I see him everywhere. In my ears dwelleth God, and his name resounds forever. Um, on my lips dwelleth God, and I repeat his name forever." I'm sorry. My every thought and impulse is surcharged by God. I walk as he walks. I talk as he talks. I am his. He is mine. I am he. And when I read that poem, I went, got it. Now I understand. Now I can bring those two worlds of mine together, right? And unfortunately, Swami Ramdas had already passed away when I read this. He passed away actually 6 years before I got to India. But his disciple, Mother Krishnabai, I don't know, Renee, if you ever heard of Mother Krishnabai. Oh, just amazing. Of my female teachers in India, and I had several, she was far and above the most amazing. And so I went to their ashram hoping he was alive. I didn't find out wasn't alive until I got there. It was in Kerala. And I would go every November and spend a month with her and doing a retreat. So this whole idea of going within to let go of all the forms and to let go of all the things, but then to find fullness in that emptiness is what Meister Eckhart is telling us. To be full of things is to be empty of God. To be empty of things is to be full of God, right? And then he also says spirituality is not learned by flight from the world. So it's not like we have to run away from the world. We have to let go of the world, not run away from it. It's not by running away from things or by turning solitary and going apart from the world. Instead, we must learn an inner solitude wherever we are, or wherever or with whomever we may be. We must learn to penetrate things and find God there. So live in the world, experience the world, but know that really what you're experiencing is God. And so it's wisdom that comes from experience and oneness. And then devotion can be a very fulfilling experience because it's becoming, when we are in love, we become one. In Krishna devotion, they talk about Radha and Krishna, and they say ek prana do dehi, which means one spirit in two bodies. And so this idea of once we know the divine, once we find this connection with the divine, then the divine is with us all the time. So what does Meister Eckhart say? Um, God is always near us. It's we who go out for a walk, right? So that's always there. And then he says, nothing in all creation is so like God as stillness. And so he constantly emphasized, go within, but function in the world while sitting within. So when we sit in the cave of our heart, we're living in the world, we're doing things in the world, we're involved in the world, but we're involved in the world knowing that we're involved with God in the world, because he tells us every single creature is full of God and is a book about God. Every creature is a word of God. And so everyone that we come in contact with, every being that we come in contact with is God in one form or another. And so then why run away from the world? The world is full of, there's no place we can go that God is not there. An amazing teacher, an Indian teacher by the name of Deodahabala. Um, he passed away. He left his body in 1989. He was at least about 150 years old, because there's record of him as a teacher in 1888, and he died in 1989. And so anyway, I was once with him, and he was sitting with a group of people, and he said to everybody, close your eyes and just chant the name of Ram for 10 minutes inside. And then afterwards, one of the people asked him a question and said, how can I remember Ram? Because I close my eyes and immediately I see my wife, I see my farm, I see my kids, I see the animals, I have to worry about this, I got to worry about this. How can I possibly take my mind to Ram, to focus? And he said, where can your mind go where Ram is not? He says, in every leaf and in every branch, God exists. In every pore and in every hair, God exists. It's not that we have to find God. We just have to realize, like Meister Eckhart said, that God is always right there. We have to be constantly reminded until we remember. And once we remember and we know that God is with us, then then everything is much better. And then we get this idea of the singleness, and this is beautiful. Meister Eckhart, he was talking about the eyes with which we see God, but he doesn't say the eyes. He says the eye. The eye, and let me get this. Here it is. The eye through which I see God. And he's only using one eye, and I want to talk about that. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one seeing, one knowing, one love. So Shivaji has a third eye in the middle, right? And I asked my teacher about that. What does that mean? And he says, two eyes represent duality, good and bad, right and wrong, you and me, happiness, sadness, poverty, wealth, yesterday, tomorrow. But the oneness is when we can just close down the duality and just see the divine in everything. And that's exactly what Meister Eckhart was saying to us. You can truly love God when you know God is with us in every single moment. Um, so he says, I must become God and God must become me. Right? When I dwell on the ground, and when that happens, then the separation is not there anymore. And that's when he talks about the disappearance of God. And he says, when I dwelt in the ground, in the bottom, in the stream, and in the source of Godhead, no one asked me where I was going or what I was doing. Back in the womb from which I came, I had no God and merely was myself. And then when I returned to God and to the core and to the soil and to the ground, and the ground he calls Ungun, which is the underground, really, the stream and the source of the Godhead. No one asks me where I am coming from, nor where I have been, for no one misses me in the place where God ceases to become. Or sometimes they translate, God passes away. And what he means by that is God as a separateness from me. So when I see God as something else, it's a dualistic understanding. Um, and but really, when I realize that the eye with which I'm seeing God is the same eye with which God is seeing me, then I realize that I can never be separate from God. And so the idea of thinking of God as something out there or someone out there is Meister Eckhart is telling us, no, right there with you. You are your essence and God's essence is the same, which is why the church freaked out, right, when he spoke, and why he was charged with heresy. Um, but he says, we when what we plant in the soil of contemplation, we reap in the harvest of action. So this idea of be staying inside, having my home, having my garden, having my existence within, but totally functioning without. I'm doing all the things that I have to do as if I think this is all that's real, when I realize it is all that's real and it's all God. It's nothing but God. So then it makes functioning easier. And when somebody is giving you a hard time, it's like God is saying, okay, can you deal with this one? So I have to tell you just a brief story about my daughter. She was third grade. She came home one day and she had such a sad look on her face. And I said, Sachi, what's the matter? She said, Dad, I had to take a test today. It was so hard. And I said, really? Wow. She said, yeah, it was really hard. She said, is fourth grade harder? I said, oh yeah, fourth grade's gonna be harder. She went, oh. She couldn't she couldn't imagine dealing with it. And I said, and when you get to high school, Sachi, it is gonna be so. She goes, I don't want to go. So, but that's what I tell my students. When we're in third grade, that those are the hard tests. When we're given really hard tests, why are we given hard tests? Because we're being punished? No, because we're ready for them, right? Um, that's when that because we're given that. I don't think we're ever given a test if we can't pass it. We're always given tests that we can pass because God knows what we can pass and what we can't pass. God knows what we know. God knows to what extent our wisdom is nurtured. And so we are constantly being given tests to help us remember. And really, that's what the thing is so when we're apart from God, we are dismembered. When we're with God, we are remembered. So to remember the divine is to be one with the divine. And I think that Eckhart was constantly telling us that. And that's why the church had a really hard time because they're teaching a very dualistic God is someplace up there and we're down here. And Meister Eckhart knew that that wasn't the situation at all. And his love of God was no less than the love of God of Francis of Assisi or the love of God of Teresa de Avila or Caterina de Siena. But his love of God was interior in a way that theirs was not expressed in that same way. They expressed a much more external experience of the divine, where Meister Eckhart, yeah, I mean, for me, clearly the number one Catholic mystic. He brought the essence of divinity and love so powerful. When I was in India, sometimes I would read because I started reading Eckhart when I was a Hindu monk, and so I would be reading a book, and one of my guru brothers, another monk would come by and he says, "What are you reading?" And I'm saying, "Oh, I'm reading about this Catholic sadhu, right?" And he says, "What did he say?" And I'd read something, and they go, "That's right, right." They got it too. They thought, "Yeah, he knows what he's talking about." So that to me is Eckhart. And if we can allow that understanding of Eckhart to be with us, we we are at peace everywhere.
Oh, thank you so much, Ramdasji.
Sure,
Oh.
sure.
uh, yeah, I'm not even a Catholic, and like, wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Very exciting. Cliff's
it is.
gonna ask you a for real question, but I have
Sure,
a little question.
sure, sure, sure.
How did your daughter accept the answer that you gave her? Did she get it?
It was hard for her because she was like 8 years old, right?
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? It slowly came, and we would talk about it, and we would talk about that all the tests that are going to come to her are going to be tests that you're given because you're ready to pass them. And if you really want to be accomplished at anything, so it was at that time that she started playing soccer. Actually, she started playing soccer when she was 7. So she was playing in the under 8. And, she didn't know how to kick a ball and anything like that. And she'd say, that's hard, but I'm enjoying it. And I go, there we go. So you should always look at those tasks as enjoyable, right? So when you're given something that is hard, just go, oh man, this is great. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to get stronger. And I told her that's going to be your strength, right? And it kind of came to a point where she was in the on the varsity at Kaiser, and she almost had a three, I forgot what they call when you do three goals in a game. She had two, and she almost had the three. And rather than she came and she goes, next time I'm going to get three. It's like, right, harder. And she knew that struggling and doing more is fulfilling. And to struggle with our ego and know more of our divinity is the hardest struggle and the most fulfilling at the same time. And Meister Eckhart expresses it so much in almost everything he says. He's nudging us in that direction.
Perfect. Thank you. Cliff.
Yeah.
Well, I think Ramdas, a little bit like you, I've been very drawn to Eastern religious teachings like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism.
Yeah.
But there's one teaching in particular in the Gospels that has always resonated with me, and that's from Luke 17:20 and 21, which reads, let me see if I can pull it up here. It says, and when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation, neither shall they say, lo here or lo there,
Yeah.
for behold, the kingdom of God is within you.
Yes.
And, I'm also thinking of Plato's teaching that all real learning is recollection. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of wondering why the church has been so insistent on directing us away from an internal search for God and truth and more towards externalities when really, Plato's pointing inward and most of the Eastern philosophies and teachings are pointing one to do an interior search for
Mhm.
oneself or God or truth. I just wonder why the church got such a disconnect with the teachings of Christ there.
I think it's because, well, just a very brief story. There was a monk, and he was an abbot, and he was very great, very great, very holy being, and he was head of the monastery. But a cat showed up, a little kitten, and so he started feeding it. So whenever he would sit for meditation, the kitten would come and sit on his lap, right? And so he'd sit there, and the monks would see that he would be meditating, and this kitten sit on his lap. He ended up getting older, and there was a guy that came and really wanted to be like him, and he would sit, but he couldn't meditate, and he goes, I understand, I don't have a kitten. Right. And I think that's the church. They could never become what Jesus was. So they make their own creation, and it's external. They have externalized the reality because they don't have the inner experience of the reality. and when they do, and therefore when somebody like Meister Eckhart or uh, Teresa or Francis or and so many of the amazing Catholic mystics, they felt threatened by them because they actually the mystics were walking the talk. They knew the words, but they never walked them. And that's not just the church, that's the Western approach, unfortunately, has been the externalization of the divine, not the internalization. Cliff, you and Renee and I and so many of us, we've been blessed with having those teachings about the inner experience and to be able to do the practices that help us to have that inner experience. So many of I mean right now, I teach my intro to world religion class every semester. This is the 67th time that I'm teaching this class actually. So I'm kind of getting it down. But I'm doing Christianity right now, and when I talk about that Jesus was more of a mystic, and I talk about that, some of my Christian students have a really hard time with it. No, that's not the way Jesus wasn't like that. I mean, because they have bought into the externalized reality rather than the internal, right? They think the laws rather than the spirit. So I think that's why church wasn't ready. There were individuals, but the church as an organization, like most organizations, you know, they don't necessarily get it.
Yeah. Sounds as though there's a little bit of feeling of threat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
almost jealousy too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because
I want to have that experience,
yeah.
but I'm not having it.
Yep, exactly. And therefore, you're probably not really having it. It must be the devil. And that's what they said when Meister Eckhart was brought up for heresy, charges of heresy. When he said, the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me, they had a heart attack. I mean, it's like, whoa, what is this? No, you can't have that. Right? And if it wasn't that he was a Dominican, he probably would have been executed. Just very briefly, the history of the inquisitors during the Inquisition were the Franciscan monks and the Dominican monks. And Dominic Guzman, who started the Dominicans, and Francis of Assisi, who started the Franciscans, they would have turned over in their graves if they knew what these subsequent orders were being forced to do by the church. And so he was arrested by a Franciscan, but because the Dominicans were also a part of it, they were the judges and they let him off, right? Because he was a Dominican. But even them, they were warning him, don't say things like that. They were afraid too. And that's when he subsequently got tried again, like after about 7 or 8 years, because he didn't shut up. He said he would, but then he didn't. And while he was on the second trial is when he died, and probably died of they don't think that it was a forced death. In other words, he wasn't murdered. But they banned his teachings. They were too much for them. The Dominicans continued them. The Dominicans kept them in secret and passed them on. And it's thanks to these great Dominican monks that we know about Meister Eckhart, because if it had been up to the church, we would have never heard about him after that.
Hmm. What era was that?
He died in 1327. His first trial was 1306, and then came out, and then he was under house arrest, and then he went to trial again in like 1323. And the irony of it was Pope John the 22nd that charged him with heresy, and it was Pope John the 23rd in 1959 who opened the church up in the Second Vatican Council. So he did exactly the opposite of what his predecessor had done 800 years before. So, yeah, the history of the church is amazing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but what I have to say, if it wasn't for the church, we wouldn't have people like Meister Eckhart and the others, right? And they have been lights in the European world, lights in the Middle East. And as we know, oftentimes there's not a lot of lights there. So,
Thank you.
yes. One thing that I think, Renee, you sent when I sent you those couple of the verses, and I think you added a verse. I think this was one that you added. If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. That is like the culmination of Meister Eckhart, right? With all of his wisdom. It was the wisdom, the most humble are the wisest, right? And the wisest are the most humble. And Meister Eckhart clearly was that.
Yeah. It sounds as if he knew the importance of what he had to share with the world. And so that's why he didn't shut up. I mean,
Yeah.
Like he knew that God was even within the trials that they were putting him through.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right?
Is you have to walk the talk. And I think he knew that God had blessed him with such amazing experiences and wisdom. He knew it was his duty to share it.
Yeah.
And whatever came about it. I mean, I think of, do you know the Gymnosophists were?
Well, I think they have their source in India. They were the naked
The naked philosophers.
philosophers in India, right?
Yeah. Alexander had taken a few back to Greece with him. And there was one who stayed there. And the reason that he took him is when Alexander had come to India and he had heard about this great teacher that everyone, and he says, I want to see who this guy is. They think they know so much. And they just walk around naked. Right. So he sent his army to get this one guy, and they found him. He was just laying on the ground. The sun was out, and he was just laying on the ground. And the guy came and stood over him. So the shadow was there, and the guy opened his eyes and he says, who are you? And he says, I'm from the king, and he wants you to come and see him. And he says, well, you know where I am. He can come here. And by the way, get out of my sunlight. And he says, if you don't go with me, I'm going to kill you. And he says, well, got to die sometime. Right. So the guy went back and told Alexander, and he went, okay, I got to meet this guy. But what they say is he took him back to Greece, and he had gotten elderly and he knew it was time to die. So he just started himself on fire. He went, time to go. So,
Hmm.
yeah. There have been, throughout history, there have been amazing people that have tried to show us. And I don't think that as humans, I don't think humanity as a race evolves. I don't see it, because when you read Homer, and Homer's like 2,800 years ago, and you read Plato 2,300 years ago, and you realize the same issues that we have now, they had then. The same, like Manini stuff, people arguing, people bitter, people jealous, people this, people that. It's like we don't ever evolve as human beings. Individuals evolve, right?
Well,
So
that's where I would probably have to take issue because I think that's such a enormously tiny, can I use that enormously tiny time frame to be looking at? Because the course of human history is just so grand. And, when
it's
especially
grand because of people like that, the people that we're talking about.
Oh, no. I mean, grand time wise.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you look at a Brahminical time chart,
Yeah.
Ram was born 1,000,000 years ago. And
Yeah.
so we, in a short time frame, like a few thousand years, or, 40s of thousands or hundreds of thousands, it's not enough time to see the scope of evolution.
Sure, but I guess when I talk to my students, because my students have a hard time remembering yesterday, right? And they and conceptualizing anything. Think about this, Renee. Anything over 12 years ago is ancient history for most of my students. So if
Okay,
it was,
well, from that perspective, yeah, we haven't made a lot of progress, but
yeah. So anything that their understanding of history and is we haven't changed in the length of time that we understand, at least we in the West. Obviously, those of us who understand the Indian traditions and understand the ancientness of it is different. But from the Western perspective, we haven't evolved at all. We are, hopefully, maybe in another couple thousand years, we'll move in that direction. But individuals do. And that's the beauty, is that no matter what's going on in our crazy world, there are always amazing individuals
yeah,
who can help us. Somebody asked Thich Nhat Hanh once, because he was talking about bodhisattvas, somebody who's ready for enlightenment but chooses to come back and reborn to help others. And he asked Thich Nhat Hanh, so how many bodhisattvas are there? And Thich Nhat Hanh said, as many as there are stars in the sky. So there are so many amazing people in the world. We just have to open our eyes and see them. Or I should say, open our hearts and see them. And clearly Meister Eckhart was telling us that. Every person is a word of God.
I was just, as I'm putting together the 2026 Almanac, reading all these quotes, and one of them I read was from Mr. Rogers' mother.
Nice, nice.
And she said, whenever you're scared, look for someone, because there's always someone helping.
Always, always.
There's always someone helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've traveled a lot. You folks have traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot on the ground, meeting a lot of simple people, and I've been in situations that could conceivably be pretty intense. And I have always found that if you go to a person and you just go to them and say, "I need help. Can you help me?" That person who might have just been looking and just probably would have just ignored me, because I went to them and asked for help, it's it hit their heart. And I think 99 and 9/10% of us would do the same. When we see somebody in need and we're asked to help, we'll help. And that hopefully will only get better. But it's so amazing now. I mean, the number of people who give up their comforts and even give up their lives to help somebody they don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, to me, the epitome of what we mean by humanity.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to find out if Bob, since you are pretty steeped, I know you're a religious studies professor as well, so I'm sure you're really very well acquainted with Meister Eckhart. I'm just wondering about your experience as a Zen Buddhist who technically doesn't believe in God, but with this direct experience of the divine or something beyond or something like that. Can you kind of work with that? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I don't think Meister Eckhart believed in God either. No,
Well, not the dualistic God, clearly.
well, that's really the connection. I was thinking of your quote that said something, God is always with us. It's we that take a walk.
Yeah.
And of course, who's walking right with us? How can we possibly walk away from God? And I sort of was
Yeah.
thinking about that. Well, that's the irony of us thinking we are able to take a walk is amazing. And it kind of goes back to the Grand Inquisitor when the church is really directly doing the other temptations. In other words, where Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this earth, they say, yeah, here we are, we're for you, and turn bread into wine. Yes, here's some bread, have some. People, and they were doing what people wanted from
Yeah.
that dualistic perspective,
Yeah.
and not doing what Jesus, of course, did as a mystic. And I kind of remembered back again thousands of years when Nagarjuna, the Madhyamaka teacher, um, was asked by Subhuti, one of the disciples, do we reach Buddhahood through cultivation or non-cultivation? And the Buddha said, neither through cultivation nor through non-cultivation. And Nagarjuna actually says, because Subhuti asked his question from the mind of clinging, the Buddha answered as he did. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with cultivation or practice. We all practice. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with saying we're already there, so there's no need to cultivate. But from the mind of clinging, we have to let it all go, as you said from the very beginning. And that's what struck me as the connection, really, of whether you call it the mind of duality, the mind of clinging. Once you cling to a concept, then that concept is dead for you. It can no longer live. And that's why I think the connection with all of this is if you connect dualistically with God, you know, then you're simply serving him as the Grand Inquisitor did. You're really making of him an accomplice.
Yeah.
And the same thing when you ask from the mind of clinging, are we ever realized? The Buddha says no. But Bodhi, realization is Buddha. Buddha is realization. There's no separation.
Yeah.
And that's what struck me as really the connection between all of these paths. And focusing on a God that you believe in is really looking up there for the long white beard in the clouds. You're going astray. That's how I kind of read it. Really, there's a tremendous mystical tradition in Buddhism of direct understanding, as you were describing it, and through the heart mind, or however you want to describe it. But it's an experience. It's not, I'm arriving. If I think, well, if I practice hard, I'll reach nirvana. And that's saying, I here, separate, will reach nirvana separate out there. Everything is wrong. There's no way that process can work because you're clinging to the idea of a self and you're clinging to the idea of an end, of a perfect entity. Whereas, as Cliff said, kingdom of God is within you and it's perfect. You just have to realize it. And that's the irony when you say, how many bodhisattvas are there? Well, there are as many bodhisattvas as there are people who have ever lived. Uh,
Yeah.
there's that side of it as well. All bodhisattvas. Um,
Well,
yeah.
I think we find it in the Buddhist tradition, Hindu tradition, in the Taoist tradition, especially those three. The idea that ultimately there is that which is beyond form, beyond it, conception. Lao Tzu says right from the beginning, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. If you can name it, that's not it. Because to name something is to frame it, define it. If I say something as a mango, as soon as just one word, I have cut out 99 and 1/10 millionths of everything else. Just one word. And so that's why Lao Tzu couldn't use any words to define the Tao because it transcends everything. And Brahman in the Vedas, in the Vedanta, in the Upanishads, Brahman is beyond all understanding. Um, Nirvachaniya, which we use in English, ineffable. It's undescribable. it's not even it's not a he, it's an it. And it's undescribable. It transcends all attempts at framing. So therefore, anything that we create, any God we create isn't God,
Yeah.
just by
And
the
again,
nature of our creating it.
on the flip side, there's nothing wrong with the words. When
Yeah.
I say God is kind, God is great, God is loving, no problem, as long as I don't cling to those framing like concepts.
Mhm.
So we can talk, we can
Yeah.
have ideas, and we can have those ideas be part of our experience.
Yeah.
But that clinging mind is, and different traditions call it different things. You must die to live,
Yeah.
is part of a number of traditions. Well, what's
Mhm.
dying?
Mhm.
That clinging egocentric self that is separate. If I'm separate from you, well, that's it. We no longer can communicate.
Yeah.
Let's hear from some other people's experiences. And Mary is, I know, from the Catholic Church. Dustin was brought up in more of a gospel church. And I know Adela has a Christian background, but I'm not sure which kind. I'd love to hear about your experiences along these lines.
I just find it fascinating to hear. It doesn't shake my beliefs. And it just enhances the real truth that God is everywhere. God is in everything. And if we respect life, we respect God. And
Yeah.
so thank you all. I just enjoyed this talk very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you have the direct experience of God's being in the fabric that you're pushing through the sewing machine as you're saying your prayers for everyone you're sewing those patu skirts for. This all melds together. Dustin?
Yeah, thanks so much for that wonderful presentation, Ram Dass.
Mhm.
And I'm reminded of a few scriptures. One that's at the top of my mind is, greater is he that lives in me than he that is in the world. And that's such an interesting perspective on what is the in me and what is the world. And I always love some of these scriptures that require some perhaps personal deciphering or personal interpretation, because I think it's in that evaluation of perspective through your own mind's eye, through your own soul, through your own experience, revelation can happen. And those, for me, in the church setting, and this is non-denominational, Pentecostal, full gospel type of church. Within the walls of the church was so much strength, so much of God, so much truth, in how we were raised, within those walls of the church. And there was always this intention of this separation of what's happening in the world outside of the church and what's happening inside of the walls of the church. I think through life and through personal experience, you discover that the greatest marketplace where we can be an encounter of God or an experience of God for anyone is really anywhere, in any place, in any season that the universe has placed us. And we go through these seasons. I was thinking about this the other day, of times where we're so close with friends, we consider them family. And we have those moments with them for a period of time, and then that season is gone. They move on, they get married, they move away. And the next thing you know, you're again perhaps with a new group of people that you've been placed in their lives, they've been placed in your life. And those moments, I think, with people wherever we may be, are moments that we have been just given the honor to be the experience or the encounter of God, not only for someone, but even for ourselves on this path of learning and growing. And I think when I realized that, specifically in the workplace, wherever work or career had taken me, that just really transformed my view of what it means. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. We are in this world and we are here with others, yet there's a whole universe within. And yeah, there was just bridging that connection and removing the lines of the separation, because there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible that talks about this separation of the wheat and the chaff and the goats and the lambs and Jews and the Gentiles. And so there are these interweaving sort of perspectives of compassion and empathy and unity, but also this separation. And so that scripture just came to my mind, and it just reminded me how we can be in this world and loving it and living it and experiencing God, but not necessarily of it, perhaps of the carnal aspects of things, or I listened to this interesting podcast earlier, and it was on the topic of business and just like being focused on whatever your tasks are in the day in order to be productive. And one thing really stood out to me. The interviewee was saying it's learning to identify the difference between signal and noise. And signal is the internal sort of compass that allows us to know when and what to focus on. And this is an important top priority for me today in this moment. And noise are all the different distractions, all the other reasons, all the other things that can come up throughout the day that might try to pull us away from staying tuned into that signal to actually make progress on the things that are really important in that moment. And so, yeah. But thank you very much for opening up, reminding me about that train of thought. Greater is he that's in us than in the world.
Yeah, that was really helpful in terms of this idea of being in the world, but not of the world. And yet, as Ram Dass was saying, when we are truly in the world, where God is everywhere in every single cell and molecule and experience and thing that happens, we're not of the world, and we're completely of the world to the extent that the world is God.
Another verse from Meister Eckhart: the most important hour is always the present. The most significant person is precisely the one sitting across from you right now. This moment is reality. And this moment, God is present. And in this moment, we have the ability, and I would say the duty, to see divinity happening, to acknowledge divinity happening. Again, the beauty of Eckhart. He was saying, right now, you do it right now. There's no wait till tomorrow. It's now.
Adele, are you at a point where you could tune in and share anything? Adela? Oh, I'm getting you and Adele Tamita mixed up. I don't know that you have a Christian background. I know that's not the faith you're following right now. So Adele, tell us about your experience.
Background is Christian, but I belong to a Indian bhakti tradition called Radhaswami, and it's a guru tradition. And I'm struggling. I did an art piece on that eye of God, and I really appreciate that interpretation. I just liked the quote, but I don't think I really understood it. So if you wouldn't mind explaining that again to me.
Well, the idea of, and the reason that in the Hindu tradition we have the idea of the third eye, and it's because the eye, how we see something, is our vision. And when we only see one thing, when we have a narrow, so instead of having two eyes and seeing right and wrong and you and me and male and female and yesterday and today, if we can bring it into just now. And that's what Meister Eckhart, the last verse that I read of Meister Eckhart, right? It's now. Now is the moment. Now is the most important moment and the person right in front of you. And so the idea of stop the duality, just see the divine right now in front of you. Just see, or as Charan Singh Ji, the founder of Radhaswami, I had some nice meetings with him years ago, and we talked about things like that. And he would talk about just seeing the divine in all the work. So I was at his ashram and he would have everybody work for a while in the afternoons. But he says, work is worship. And everything you're doing with the presence of the divine right there. Never a distance. It's not like, oh, you go to the temple and you do something else and then you go here and this is work and that's prayer. No, it's all prayer. It's all connecting. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Thank you. I am struggling to get there, you know.
we are all struggling to get there.
I believe what you say there, but it seems like other people have more experience with that because I mean I believe in it. I have faith in it, but sometimes I don't experience it. I move in and out, and this is why it's painful. So, but I still will keep to my path, even though I'm just so caught in duality, you know. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But thank you for the talk.
Sure.
Thank you.
You feel like you need a kitten?
Yeah, I do have a cat, you know. I'm clinging to the kitten.
The cat is not helping one bit. Cat has its own agenda. Ramdas, you talked about the third eye,
Yeah.
and in a sense, you can see that third eye going out to look at the person right in front of you. But I wonder
Yeah.
if you could talk about the idea of the eye not being directional in the sense that it's also going within. So
Yeah.
the eye within with which I see God is
Yeah.
going within and
Yeah.
identifying. I wonder if you could talk a little about that.
Sure. And I think that's why Meister Eckhart said it is the eye. He didn't say the eyes. He didn't use a plural because I think he understood that when our vision is one pointed, we only see God. And God is one pointed because God sees us. And I think it's that kind of well, Bob, as I'm sure you well understand, I mean, the whole beauty of mystical interpretation is just cutting to the chase. Let's just see, what does this really mean for me right now? Because this moment, as Meister Eckhart told us, the present is the most important hour. What can I know right now? What can I experience right now? So I can just take and look forward. And if I can, and so I don't know if you know what Trataka is. But Tratika is a practice where you gaze at a mandala. And oftentimes in the mandala, there's something right in the center that you've put your gaze on. We don't stare at it. Staring at it is like this. Focusing at it, gazing at it is just a calm viewing. And if we keep our eye on that one thing, pretty soon everything else just kind of blurs. And then there's only the thing in the center. And I think that that's the vision, the idea of this one eye is just seeing one thing. And if all I see is the dot, then the dot in the center, and I'm thinking of the Sri yantra, which is a yantra that I've used a lot. There's a dot right in the center. And pretty soon the dot becomes, the whole thing becomes just that dot. And so that dot represents the center of the goddess. Everything else just is a more blurry manifestation of the goddess. And in the purest sense, it's what I see. So in the purest sense, I see God, and every other thing. It's hard for us, as Adele said, it's hard for us to be able to see and understand all that, because in a way, it's the blurriness that we need to be able to focus our vision on. But by using just one eye and seeing only one thing, in other words, let go of the duality. Can I just see divinity in everything? Can I just see divinity in everyone? Can I just see beauty in absolutely everything that happens? And to me, that's what the whole idea of the one eye is about.
And that idea of going within in Buddhism would be to see your own Buddha nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, that focus is really, the idea of a purity of heart.
Yes.
In
Yes.
that, yeah.
Well, it's like when you first,
Gentlemen, we've past the top of the hour, and I know some people have, so we could close and then continue as long as we get the closure first.
Sure.
And I just have this feeling that Adele, you've got the key to your question right in that painting that you made of the one eye. I bet you it's right there waiting for you. Let me really, really thank Ram Dass so much on behalf of all of us for really such exquisite presentation. It was so relevant. It was so heartfelt. I did not feel in the tiniest bit preached at. I just felt as if somebody was sitting beside me sharing, hey, this is something that's really important to my life that I want you to know about too.
Yeah.
And that was such a lovely fireside kind of presentation. It's really beautifully done. We have somebody herself in the Hindu tradition, Janani Lakshmanan, who has danced for us and chanted mantras for us at the Diwali shows for the last 3 of our Diwalis. Just a wonderful lady who is also getting her doctorate in math at UH Manoa.
Oh,
and
nice.
she is going to be speaking to us on the topic of sacred human geometry.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to be really, really fascinating because we get this idea of sacred human geometry, like from the Renaissance, like Da Vinci's man, the man star inside the circle. But where was he getting it? He was getting it from Pythagoras way back in ancient Greek. But where did Pythagoras get it? Well, he had traveled to India.
Yeah.
Which, for example, was so advanced in mathematics that they invented the zero that the world didn't even know about. So I think it's very, very interesting that we're going to have this kind of confluence of cultures as we approach this topic of sacred human geometry.
I don't know her. I've never met her. But you might ask her to just mention Ramachandra in her talk. He was probably the greatest mathematician of the 20th century. This is South Indian.
Oh, Ramachandra. There's an
There's a movie about Ramanujan. I'm sorry.
Ramanujan. Yeah.
Ramanujan.
Ramanujan.
There was
Yeah.
a movie, The Man Who Knew Infinity.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
amazing, totally amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
He saw the numbers were his divinity. And he got it from praying to his goddess.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Amazing. One of those direct experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
So we'll hope to see all of you next week. In the meantime, really wishing all of you a wonderful Thanksgiving, however you might spend it. I'm so thankful to all of you. You're really important people to everything that has happened at this Gems from the Wisdom Traditions over the last 5 years or so that we've been doing it. Just so much gratitude to all of you for helping to perpetuate it. Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you all. Thank
Yeah.
you, us.
Thank you, Bob and Abdullah. Bye, Mary.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Aloha.
Aloha.